So I saw this story where Florence Pugh talked about her experience in Midsummer playing the character Danny. And she basically said that she abused herself in order to complete this performance. And I see that something more being praised than actually criticized.
Because they see it as sacrificing for the art.
Yeah, it's like what level of dedication do you have to your craft? Yeah. And it really turns into like who can degrade themselves the most as like a
and the directors like
show of loyalty to Hollywood and to directors who have inflated egos.
I will say I watched the movie and I have never had a movie leave me that speechless before. Not for necessarily it was a technically good movie. It was just so deeply unsettling that I didn't come away from it feeling like I gained something. But I think she's more talking about the mental illness aspect than anything else, because her character is supposed to play somebody who is just, witnessed her entire family die, and her boyfriend or husband, I forget if they're married or not, is treating her terribly, and they go on this retreat, and then she gets forced into abusing drugs and like all of this crazy stuff. Like I see where she might be coming from with it, but like that movie was definitely one of the weird ones.
I mean, Ari Aster is the director on this. I have seen Hereditary. I've not seen Midsummer. I think I've seen all I needed to see. And if anything convinces me that some movies that come out of Hollywood are cursed, and the people who watch them are thereby cursed by watching them, that would be it. I'm being so serious.
Oh,
like, I don't mean it as like hyperbole. I mean, like, literally, it would not surprise me if movies like that, especially directed by Ari Aster, did have like curses put upon them.
Yeah.
Maybe you believe in the validity of those or not, but the intent is clear, I think. And I don't think you can walk away from a movie like Midsummer having gained anything, like you said.
At the very most generous for movies like that, you can say that the goal was to unsettle people, which it certainly
I guess that's
succeeded.
the goal of any horror movie, but I think it goes further than that.
Yeah,
I think it's about like almost, it's not just like, it's like, you can say seeking brother husband, that definitely is coarsening the culture, but it's like doing more than that when you're framing it as like this high art. You're dulling the moral sensibilities of the people who are watching it, who, I'm sorry, are like 105 IQ, and they don't know if there's a meaning to what they're watching or not, nor do they care. They're just watching it and becoming increasingly amoral.
People, there was a couple of comments during the segment yesterday when we were talking about Brooke Shields and everything that happened to Brooke Shields when she was 10 years old on Pretty Baby.
And younger,
and talking about a lot of things in the 80s and 90s and before were done that were unspeakable in the name of what they would call high art. And excuses were made and passed off and saying, well, it's okay because it's art. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to push back on in today's culture, because then they just say, oh, you don't understand it. You don't get it. I think the Brooke Shields one...
That's the easiest, most intellectually lazy way to dismiss people's criticisms.
The Brooke Shields one is easier to push back on now.
Sure, yeah.
But something like this is obviously different, and I think a lot of people tend to give these people the benefit of the doubt. They say, oh, look, it's a big-name director. He must know what he's doing. He must have... I don't even know if the average person would say they have good intentions, but they would say that their intentions are not bad, that their intentions are just artistic. And that's how they get away with it.
It's just like, I don't see it as an endeavor of like... artistic skill, because A24 is just Marvel, but for people who wear beanies and circular glasses. Yes. Like, it's a soulless corporation.
I live in Williamsburg.
Not that, it's like, it's not that deep, Like, the people watching these movies aren't smart. The average person isn't smart. And even if you are, it just means you're better at rationalizing everything you do.
It did also do a bit of a disservice to, like, the people both people in my field and also, people who are practicing Norse pagans. They do still exist, and there's some of them that actually do it correctly. There's a lot that don't. I hate to tell everybody, but Wicca was invented in the 1950s so that a guy could sleep with you. That is what Wicca is. Look into it.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. Andrew Gardner, I want to say, is the guy's name. But like it presents, Norse society pre-Christianity as being this really weird, like sacrificial, incestuous kind of thing, and it's not historically. I think the movie does do a decent job of telling you this is a very specific cult, but I think it could have been a little bit more, they could have applied more pressure to that part of it. Because otherwise what you get is like, oh, well, Swedish hillbillies are worse than American ones, apparently. Like,
I'd rather just have the not high art version of it. There's a television show called The Following about serial killer cults. That's fantastic. That doesn't present itself as high art. It's literally just 10 p.m. plus network television violence done in a way with giving great performances by James Purefoy and Kevin Bacon. But it's not like it's presented to you like it's supposed to be high art. Though it is, ironically enough, one of the best uses. I made a tweet yesterday about one of the most important things about movies and television is when they're able to meld music and cinema together into good montages and stuff like that, or good use of music in television. And The Following is one of the best examples of that. I'm okay with that. Like that doesn't bother me. Like, and I don't know if it's necessarily helping the culture. I don't think it's making the culture anything better, but I don't think you're going to look for any of this stuff from Hollywood and find stuff that's making the culture better.
But
that would be
there are definitely repeat offenders.
As far as the people making the material, you're saying like Ari Aster being someone who does that repeatedly?
Also to clear it up, it was Gerald Gardner that started Wicca, just to be clear. Okay. Pop that in there. So
Florence Pugh said, I never played someone that was in that much pain before, and I would put myself in really shitty situations that maybe other actors don't need to do. But I would just be imagining the worst things. Each day, the content would be getting more weird and harder to do. I was putting things in my head that were getting worse and more bleak. I think by the end, I probably most definitely abused my own self in order to get that performance. And this is just something that is praised rather than being viewed with a critical eye.
Now, back in the day, if they were telling a true story about something that actually happened to someone and they felt like they were presenting to you a realistic depiction of something awful that happened to someone so that they could better bring that person's story to the forefront, would you have less of a problem with it?
I mean, if it's shown in the same level of detail, it might actually be worse because you're cheapening what someone else has experienced by making it into basically a pornographic film. I mean,
that was definitely
honest,
I don't know if you saw that scene from Midsummer, but there
is. I mean, it's basically it's an R word.
Totally unnecessary.
It's an R word scene that is totally unnecessarily graphic, prolonged, and I've said it many times in the show. I don't support the use of nudity or graphic sexuality in any show or movie. It never adds to anything in the project other than shock value. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of being brushed off as not understanding art because I say that. If anything, the people who use sex scenes instead of going to the effort of veiling those things and progressing the plot, they're the ones who don't understand art.
I've written a few scenes or a few scripts, and at no point have I ever included a sex scene. And at no point have I ever felt like it would add to the story. Mm-hmm. There's just never been a point where I was writing and I was like, yeah, this needs nudity. And
in addition to Ari Aster, there are showrunners like Sam Levinson of Euphoria. And we were talking about him recently because he had written this script for a show that is kind of in limbo right now, and pre-production hell is what they call it. Because it's been rejected so many times, he's added these extremely perverse, extremely disturbing scenes that are they're completely unnecessary. And I can't imagine that somebody who's not dangerous would even think these things up. He's writing these scenes where this actress, no exaggeration, has to hold an egg in her vaginal cavity, and if she drops it, then this guy who is her evil Hollywood producer will, quote, refuse to R-word her, and then she has to beg for him to R-word her.
The hell?
Yeah, he wrote this scene, and then we're
That's
just
not something that like a healthy mind writes.
No, that's not. Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't want to be around that person.
I've written some dark shit.
Or is it something
not like that?
that an unhealthy mind writes to deal with the fact that they understand that their mind is not healthy?
Yeah. Well, then there's the fact that if you are struggling with mental illness and you're writing as a way to get your thoughts out so that they don't dwell inside your mind, which is something I can understand, write it down, but maybe don't try to sell it or release it or force other people to see it. Like,
but it's just like he's throwing his weight around with the studio because he's a moneymaker for them, and he can just, broadcast his weird pornographic imaginations onto the public. And I just think that to bill that as like high art is just such a joke.
Yeah.
And I found this other story from related to Game of Thrones from Emilia Clarke, where in kind of a disturbingly lighthearted way, she said that she needed to drink alcohol to get through a scene where she was getting R-worded in the show. And she was just like, all I needed was vodka and some flattering lighting, and I was ready to go. And that just makes it sound like she's joking around, she's laughing, whatever. But it's actually a big deal.
And she did eventually ask for no more nude scenes.
Yeah.
I think by season 5 she had in her contract. And what's his name? Penn Badgley, the guy from You.
Yeah.
He also did the same thing.
About that too.
Which I am liking that actors are starting to push back a little bit against these unnecessary scenes because, on the one hand, if you got two characters who are in love in a show, then you might show some sort of passionate scene, but you don't need to go as far as a lot of these TV shows do, where it's verging on pornography.
Yeah.
You can
especially if it's violent.
Yeah. You know who did a really good job recently with it? Star Wars, in the show Andor.
Oh, really?
There is a scene where it definitely implies that these two characters, go to bed together. But you don't see anything aside from them, kissing, and then one of the characters takes off their shirt, and after that it cuts to black and goes to the next scene. Like, what happened, you get it, it tells you that part of the story, it's necessary. The only reason I have ever heard from actual producers and writers as to why sex scenes are necessary in movies and TV shows has nothing to do with the plot. It is entirely that sex sells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
a lot of networks, if they're on pay for cable, meaning like Showtime or HBO, they have mandated numbers of them because they know that does big bucks. And as streaming becomes more popular, all of them are essentially like that now because they're behind a paywall. Just like HBO was, just like Cinemax was.
Platforms.
Look, and I'm gonna admit right now, one of my favorite shows is Banshee, and Banshee has tons of unnecessary sex scenes that I usually like fast forward through because it doesn't advance the plot. What it's done in the show, and I understand why it's there, is that there is a certain amount of kind of there's a grimy, gratuitous nature to the production of the show, given the subject matter, the themes of the show. It makes sense. So I'm not in any way saying that makes it okay. I don't, like I said, in a lot of ways, I would rather they didn't put them in there most of the time, but that's for me, it's mainly because of runtime. Like, you're just using up story for something that I believe could easily be worked around. In a show like that, the goal was to make the show feel grimier and more real by showing something like that. And it's very pulp and fits that way. By the way, guys, I probably mentioned it before. You can take that as today's Brett recommends would be Banshee. It is on HBO Max. Also, if I haven't ever said it before, do go watch Mortal Kombat Conquest. It is one of the worst shows you will ever watch, and it is fantastic. And then go on YouTube, and there's this guy who does reviews of them where he reviews both the original and the director's cut, where somehow he has like access to the director's cuts that still have like the time code at the bottom, and he shows you like where the sound is cut in and everything. It's fantastic. So those are your recommends for the week.
You're nerding out.
Yes.
I think, like, with the idea that sex sells, I don't get it, because the majority of the sentiment I've seen about it is like, it makes me uncomfortable whether I'm watching it with friends or family or I'm alone. I see a lot of people saying like, it's really getting too much. It's getting gratuitous, and it's not because they have Puritan values or anything. It's just also, like, just watching a show or a movie these days has become not a communal experience
Yeah.
anymore, and this is part of it for sure.
Well, it isn't a communal experience anymore. Everyone watches stuff in their rooms on their phones.
I will say every time there's like a big show like House of the Dragon or something, me and my friends do try and like when Game of Thrones was on when we were in high school, we would get together every time there was a new episode, or we'd like let them stack up so we could binge. We'd order a couple of pizzas from Domino's, we'd sit down with some sodas and like have a whole night of it. So like I miss that, but I think another aspect of the whole sex sells thing though is that like yeah, sure, a lot of people feel uncomfortable about it, but the thing is there is a consistent number of people who, when you make a movie or a TV show and it's got graphic sexuality in it, will come back and watch it. So you're going for a baseline there. You could write a very good script. There are a lot of phenomenal movies that have absolutely none of that in them, but here's the thing. There's also a lot of movies that did really poorly that don't have that in them. So for a lot of studios, they might see a script that they're like, I'm like 50-50 on this. Add a sex scene to it and I'll make it.
Or if it doesn't do well and it doesn't have sex scenes, they'll scapegoat the fact that it doesn't have sex scenes.
It's shitty writing. That's it.
Yeah, I think like nudity and sexuality in a show or a movie to an extent is something I will only tolerate from it. It's not something I'll ever search out in it.
Also, I want to point out that a lot of people have been mentioning, it's a very common argument when we talk about reboots and all that stuff. They say that Hollywood has no new ideas. I actually don't agree with that because they get millions of scripts all the time. There is constantly new stuff being given to them that they just won't run because they can't market it easily and more cheaply. So I actually don't think that that's true. That they do have the ideas, they just don't want to spend the money to market those ideas.
Oh, 100%.
So
that's why they made a D&D movie.
Yeah, well, no,
we can get the D&D fans to watch the movie.
That's the way it is. Like for them, there's all sorts of new scripts, and the only person that's allowed to do that now is Christopher Nolan. He's allowed to make his own types of movies. There are other directors that are allowed to do that, but on television, it's easier to just say make him naked and let him have sex, and we'll pretend like it's high art.
Also, I found this study when I was researching for today. There are 108 minutes of nudity in Game of Thrones as a whole.
It's so long.
7 penises, 28 vaginas, 60 butts, and 134 breasts. And
wow.
I thought it would be funny if there were an odd number of breasts.
It would be really funny if there were an odd number of breasts.
For sets of breasts or total breasts? I need to know.
That would
Clarify.
only be what, 60 some.
That's not even that many. Now are we talking?
I'm not good at math.
Is it like 300 individual breasts? Like I need to know. And also I need to know, how do I get the job to be the person who
76?
counted that? Like who is
76 people?
Yeah, they also rated it 7th of all time in the number of nude scenes in any TV series.
The hell has more?
One is it's number 1, Shameless. Number 2, True Blood. Number 3, The Girls Next Door. Number 4, The L Word. 5, Masters of Sex. 6, Girls.
I am surprised that Masters of Sex is 5th. Given the name of the show.
Given the name, yeah.
I've never watched True Blood. Is True Blood worth watching?
It's like some vampire show.
No, yeah,
I know people who watched it and liked it. I've never seen it.
I think that's the one with Joe Manganiello.
But now I have a never watch list.
Yeah. Here's the funny thing is like there are shows I have a little bit more leeway in this, right? Like I'll watch the shows that have this stuff in it. I love Power. Power has tons of nudity in it. I love Banshee, has tons of nudity in it. But I just fast forward.
I mean, even for me, The Witcher was too much. Yeah. It's just over the top.
Yeah.
And I admit that I have like a lower tolerance for it than everybody else, but I think it's just so obviously intentional and it's never necessary and it never edifies the show or the viewer.
Yep. And True Detective Season 1 had some, it was not super over the top in True Detective Season 1 and seemed to fit the storyline. So there are examples of it where it's less bad.
Also, I did find the quote where Emilia Clarke said she had to fight with the showrunners about sex scenes and nudity at the end. Because I saw in the same study they showed the number of sex scenes went down every season until the end of the show. Because you just reach a limit, psychologically.
Also the actors, as they get more screen time, they develop more clout backstage.
And they get more power.
So they can start saying no.
And that's telling. Yeah. You're pressuring people with less experience into doing these things.
Well, you're giving them you're saying like, here, sell your soul if you want more power.
So she said she got more savvy to like telling showrunners what she's comfortable with.
There's a $20 one right there.
Is this Ryle Kittenhouse? He said, Brett take King?
Brett is Brett take King. Okay.
I don't know what this means.
Is that like is that like
Brett?
is that my own version of chess?
Is he saying Brett is breathtaking?
Brett?
Oh, that's
Maybe.
even better.
Is that what that means?
If so, you know what? I'm just
Playing
gonna
that. What's
take
that?
it.
What's that game where you have to like they give you a card and it has like syllables or words on it? You got to figure out what it is. That's what I'm doing with this.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna just assume that that's what he meant.
We're
because
just
it's
adding
nice.
Yeah, I mean it's
into
nice,
chats.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, it makes you feel good.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.